The call came in just after 7 p.m. A woman had rushed to a neighbor's house carrying her 2-year-old daughter. She was frantic, barely able to speak. Through tears and panic, she told them something was terribly wrong. Her wife was in the basement. The neighbor called 911. Within minutes, police officers and first responders arrived at a quiet home on Barton Street in Granby, Massachusetts. At first glance, it looked like a tragic accident. A woman was lying at the bottom of a basement staircase. There was blood on the floor. Nearby, a bucket of white paint appeared to have spilled. But as investigators moved through the basement, something felt wrong. The scene didn't look natural. The blood patterns didn't make sense. The paint didn't make sense. And before long, investigators would conclude that the woman at the bottom of the stairs had not died in an accident. She had been murdered. Her name was Marie Cochran Rintala, and over the next decade, her death would lead to one of the most controversial murder cases in Massachusetts history. Long before police tape surrounded the house on Barton Street, Marie and Cara Rintala had built a life together. Both worked as paramedics. Both understood pressure, long shifts, and the emotional toll of emergency medicine. Friends described Anna as outgoing, energetic, and full of life. She loved being around people. She was the type of person who could walk into a room and immediately become the center of attention. Cara was different, more reserved, more private, less likely to share what she was thinking. Despite their differences, they fell in love. They got married. They adopted a baby girl named Brianna. From the outside, they looked like a happy family living a quiet life in rural Massachusetts. But behind closed doors, serious problems were developing. Money became a constant source of conflict. According to investigators, the couple had accumulated massive debt. Credit cards were maxed out. Financial stress continued to grow. Arguments became more frequent. Then there were allegations of domestic violence. Police records showed previous incidents involving the couple. At one point, Cara had been arrested following accusations of assault, although the charges were later dismissed. There had also been emergency calls from the home, discussions about divorce, requests for restraining orders. Friends and family would later describe a marriage that seemed increasingly unstable. By early 2010, the relationship appeared to be hanging by a thread. Then came March 29. According to Cara's account, the day began normally. The couple had coffee together. They spent time with Brianna. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing suggested that by nightfall, one of them would be dead. Later that afternoon, Cara left the house with Brianna to run errands and go shopping. At least that was her version of events. Investigators would spend years trying to determine whether that timeline was accurate. Because if Cara truly left when she said she did, it would support her innocence. If she didn't, everything changed. While Cara was away, Anna remained at home. At some point that afternoon, one of her coworkers, a man named Mark, sent her a text message. No response. That alone wasn't evidence of anything. But according to people who knew Anna, failing to respond was unusual. As investigators began reconstructing her final hours, that unanswered message became one more piece of a growing puzzle. Nobody knows exactly what happened inside the house that afternoon. There were no surveillance cameras, no eyewitnesses, no recording of the events that unfolded, only physical evidence, and that evidence told a disturbing story. When the medical examiner completed the autopsy, the findings immediately changed the direction of the case. Anna had suffered multiple injuries. There were numerous bruises and signs of blunt force trauma. Most importantly, she had been strangled. She did not die from a fall. She did not accidentally tumble down the stairs. Someone had placed their hands around her neck and squeezed until she stopped breathing. Investigators now knew they were looking for a killer. The next question was obvious. Who had the opportunity? Police returned to the basement. They studied every photograph, every stain, every drop of blood. The more they examined the scene, the less it looked like an accident. Blood appeared in multiple locations. Some patterns suggested movement after injury. Investigators began to suspect that the scene had been altered. Then there was the paint. White paint covered portions of Anna's body. White paint covered areas of the floor. Some of it appeared dry. Some of it remained wet. To investigators, the paint raised a troubling possibility. Had someone deliberately poured it after the murder? Had someone attempted to disguise what really happened? The theory was impossible to ignore. As detectives looked deeper into the couple's relationship, they found motive everywhere. Financial problems, marital conflict, previous allegations of violence, jealousy, emotional affairs, years of unresolved tension. Prosecutors would later argue that those pressures finally exploded on March 29th. According to their theory, an argument occurred inside the house. The confrontation became violent. Anna was beaten, then strangled. Afterward, the killer allegedly attempted to stage the basement to resemble an accident. It was a powerful theory, but there was a problem. The case was almost entirely circumstantial. There was no confession, no eyewitness, no video recording, no piece of evidence that directly showed who killed Anna. Everything depended on interpretation, and interpretation would divide juries for years. Investigators also focused on items they believed had disappeared after the murder. A laundry basket, a red bag, Prosecutors suggested these items may have contained bloody clothing or other evidence removed from the house. A blood-stained rag later discovered in a McDonald's trash can drew additional attention. To prosecutors, it looked suspicious. To the defense, it proved nothing. Testing could not conclusively establish whose blood was present. The evidence remained frustratingly incomplete. Meanwhile, defense attorneys pushed back aggressively. They argued that investigators had developed tunnel vision. Once police focused on Cara, they said every piece of evidence was interpreted through that assumption. Alternative possibilities received less attention. Alternative suspects received less attention. The defense pointed to inconsistencies involving other individuals connected to Anna. They questioned witness statements. They challenged timelines. They attacked the prosecution's interpretation of the physical evidence. And most importantly, they challenged the certainty of the investigation itself. The first trial ended without a verdict. Jurors could not agree. A mistrial was declared. The second trial produced the same result. Again, jurors were divided. Again, no unanimous decision emerged. For many observers, that fact alone revealed how complicated the case truly was. If the evidence were overwhelming, conviction would have come quickly. If the evidence were weak, acquittal would have followed. Instead, jurors remained trapped between two competing explanations. Then came the third trial. This time, prosecutors introduced testimony that would become one of the most controversial aspects of the entire case. A paint expert testified about the condition of the paint found at the scene. The prosecution argued that the paint supported their timeline and their theory that the basement had been staged after Anna's death. Unlike the previous trials, this jury reached a decision. Cara Rintala was found guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence was automatic, life in prison without parole. After years of uncertainty, prosecutors finally had their conviction. But the story wasn't over. Years later, Massachusetts' highest court reviewed the case. The court examined the testimony of the paint expert. The justices ultimately concluded that the testimony should never have been admitted in the way it was presented. They determined that the methods behind the conclusions lacked sufficient scientific reliability. The ruling was devastating to the prosecution. The murder conviction was overturned. The case would return to court once again. By then, more than a decade had passed since Anna Marie Rintala's death. The questions that haunted investigators in 2010 remained unanswered. What exactly happened inside that house on Barton Street? Was Cara Rintala a calculating killer who staged a crime scene to hide a murder? Or had investigators become so focused on one suspect that they overlooked reasonable doubt? Even after multiple trials, years of litigation, and countless hours of testimony, those questions continued to divide people who followed the case. What everyone agrees on is this: Anna Marie Cochran Rintala left home that morning expecting an ordinary day. She never got another one. And somewhere within the blood, the paint, the conflicting testimony, and the years of courtroom battles lies the truth about what happened in that basement. A truth that even today remains fiercely disputed.